From the New Arts and Media Studios in Milwaukee, I'm Charles Bursell. This is The Log. We've got a few things to talk about today. Before we get into that, I want to mention this. I did comment extensively on the Kyle Rittenhouse verdict, and I'm not going to get into that today. Plenty has been said, but if you do want to hear what I had to say, I guested on Drive Time from River West on River West Radio. It's their afternoon program with Martin Hallinger. So if you want to hear that, just go to the website, charlesbursell.com, and go to the podcast, go to the log, and I've posted an extended excerpt. One other item I wanted to mention, we did an episode on September 1st, episode number 361, episode titled Nazi Hippies, where we talked about New Age types and aging hippies and so-called free thinkers who are aligning with the right wing, especially as it concerns COVID. And I think Jacobin listens to the log, because this isn't the first time after you and I have spoken about something, I'll see an essay in Jacobin on the very same thing. The title of this particular piece, New Age Wellness Cranks Are Joining Forces with the Far Right. So check that out on Jacobin Mag, as in JacobinMagazine.com. And not only that, from that same program, we talked about how the Nazis were very much into sort of magical thinking and what we would call now New Age occult sort of stuff. And Jacobin did it again. Title of this piece, How Mysticism and Pseudoscience Became Central to Nazism. So both issues we talked about in that same September 1st episode dealt with in pretty good detail by Jacobin. So there you go. A couple of interesting essays for you to read, waiting for you right now online. And again, if you want to go back and hear our episode, just go to the website. All right. I want to talk a little bit today about political correctness, so-called wokeism. A couple things happening. Interior Secretary Deb Holland moves to rid U.S. of racially derogatory place names. That's good. Also catching my eye this week, when I came very late to the game to TikTok, I'm way behind the curve on some of this stuff. But when I did finally spend some time, looked at it for a while, one of the first things I noticed was it was just filled with hip-hop and rap, and most of it was being either lip-synced or copied by white folks. And to use a term a lot of people don't like, especially by Karens, lip-syncing to black content. And I said, well, this is the new Blackface. This is horrible. This is just kind of disgusting. And so I thought, well, as I often do, I looked back, searched it a little bit. I think I can't be the first person to notice this. So yeah, this article I found, Digital Blackface led to TikTok's first strike. Digital Blackface. Some other headlines I saw. A couple of new productions of the musical Grease are being protested because they're anti-feminist. The old classic TV show Bewitched, an article about how sexist that was. A similar article about the movie When Harry Met Sally. So a lot of political correctness just sort of came across my view since last you and I spoke. And I wanted to talk a little bit about it today. I guess I'm going to, partially at least, agree with my nemesis, Bill Maher, who goes on and on. He just, every single week, he's highly critical of the left generally, of Democrats especially, for being obsessed themselves with so-called wokeness and all of these, to his mind, tangential issues. And that's why they're losing elections. It's why they're going to lose the midterms. Now, where I'm going to agree with him is there is some silliness out there. Where he's wrong is it's not what the Democrats care about. It's not their central issue. These are issues, sure, but they're not at the top of the list. They're certainly not at the top of President Biden's list or anybody running for Congress. They're not leading with that. That's a ridiculous notion that these issues define the left, being overly woke and being triggered and being politically correct all the time. Yeah, it's out there, and yeah, it's an issue, and yeah, it's legitimate. But nobody's putting it out front when they're running for Congress. If anything, it's the other side, it's the Republicans, and it's the Bill Mahers of the world that are inflating these issues and then using them as a cudgel against the left. Now, I know why the Republicans do it. I can't quite figure out why Bill Maher is doing it. He's just mistaken. Of all American commentators, he's right at the top of the list when it comes to bringing these things to the headlines. He finds obscure headlines on page 6 of the New York Times, and then he leads with it on his program, and he accuses the entire left of the political spectrum of making this their number one issue. They're not. He is. And I don't know why. Let me go back to a couple of these stories. CNBC reporting, Interior Secretary Holland moves to rid U.S. of racially derogatory place names. Of course, U.S. Interior Secretary Deb Haaland, the first indigenous person, the first Native American to hold that post. I think she's the second to hold any cabinet post. But Interior Secretary is a particularly good place for a Native American. Well, she announced on Friday of last week that the federal agency will establish a process to review and replace racially derogatory terms used in place names. A newly created federal advisory committee will review and recommend changes to derogatory federal land names, according to a U.S. Department of the Interior press release. Now, this is good. Again, it doesn't have to be on the top of President Biden's State of the Union address. It's not the main focus of the entire Democratic Party or all of the left. It's just an issue. We can walk and chew gum at the same time. I can walk and chew gum and listen to a podcast and check my email. I can do all of those things at the same time. To artificially put this right at the top of the list because it serves your preconceived notions is just disingenuous. All right, so this story, the most shining example here, Holland declared the term squaw, a pejorative for indigenous women, to be derogatory. She ordered the Board of Geographic Names, the federal body tasked with naming geographic places, to develop procedures that would remove the term from federal usage. Yeah, I learned 30 years ago in college what squaw meant. It's basically the C word. It's a pejorative. It's a slur. It's an obscenity. I learned that 30 years ago from my Native American professor in Native American Studies at San Jose State University. I mean, it's not like we're just discovering this or we're making it up. And to my surprise, the word squaw currently appears, according to this article, in the names of more than 650 federal land units. There again, according to the Board on Geographic Names data, which I've never heard of the Board on Geographic Names, but I guess that makes sense. Somebody's got to name these places. Holland said in the press release, "Racist terms have no place in our vernacular or on our federal lands. Our nation's lands and waters should be places to celebrate the outdoors and our shared cultural heritage, not to perpetuate the legacies of oppression." Of course. Can you imagine a more reasonable statement? This is not radical. This is not overly politically correct. It's not wokeism in the sense that Maher and the Republicans would have you believe. This is just basic, simple, bottom line, low bar progress that this nation and every nation just has to deal with on an ongoing basis. Some advocates welcomed Holland's announcement, saying that the move by the federal government is long overdue. Yeah, it's overdue. Like I said, I learned this 30 years ago. I didn't know it as a kid. I had no idea until I learned it from my college professor. And then I did a little reading. I did a little follow-up. And, oh, yeah, this is just basically a dirty word. The Native American Rights Fund, the Wilderness Society, others applauding this move. It's not the first time. Reading again here, the department and the board have made similar moves over the years to replace derogatory place names and terms. In 1962, then Interior Secretary Stuart Udall directed the board to eliminate the use of a derogatory term for black people. And in 1974, the board identified a pejorative term for Japanese people as derogatory and eliminated its use as well. The board voted in 2008 to rename a mountain in Phoenix after the first Native American woman to die in combat while serving in the U.S. military. There was squaw in that name, and it now honors Army Specialist Lori Piestewa. States have taken this measure to eliminate the S word. There have been lots of name changes in the private sector. Probably the most familiar one, Squaw Valley Ski Resort in California, changed its name to Palisades Tahoe. And Squaw Valley, now known as Olympic Valley. So this is just the normal course of events. This is just basic decency. For the Bill Mahers of the world to look at something like this and deride it as wokeism, or even worse, to blame these sorts of moves, to cast these kinds of moves as defining the Democratic Party, defining the left, mocking them for it, accusing us of being triggered and oversensitive. And, he always has to, I'm using Bill Maher as the example just because he's the most visible. But it's a whole way of thinking from radical centrists aligning with the right wing. They love to bring ageism into this thing. They criticize millennials and Gen Z with their condescending language. So this is it's just a great example of what happens all the time and what ought to happen all the time. Language changes. Decency changes. We learn, we grow. Can you imagine? Some of I won't even mention them now. I don't like to say them out loud. But some of the language we used to use as kids, I'm old enough to remember some horrible things. Imagine if they were still acceptable. It's the natural order of things. Stop getting all crazy about it. All right, let's go back to this digital blackface thing. Again, I'm late to the game, but it only took me a few minutes of scrolling through this stuff to see what was going on. And being aware of these things and being a little concerned and calling them out doesn't make me a Chicken Little, the sky is falling. I don't put it at the top of my list. You know what's at the top of my list? Economic inequality, climate crisis, racial injustice. I can prioritize things. I can walk and chew gum. But I'm certainly going to spend a couple of minutes and talk about this. Original creative content being appropriated by whites and literally copied verbatim on sites like TikTok, or Facebook has a new TikTok-esque feature. I think they call it Reels. Go ahead, check it out. Filled with Karens. Filled with Bubbas. Copying, and in many, many cases, it's so common, literally lip-syncing to black voices or using black music. Now, I guess the best thing you can say is they love the music. And I suppose you can make the argument. In fact, I've made kind of this argument in the past. There's been lots of black culture. Jazz, hip-hop, roots rock and roll, Chuck Berry, Little Richard, that white folks love. I love it. And I was in a band. I had a garage band when I was a sophomore in high school, and we played songs by black artists. And I guess you definitely can make a positive argument. Well, we just love it. And it's not appropriation. We're just, we're one America. All right, I guess that's the positive spin you can put on it. But scrolling through these TikTok videos was really kind of disgusting. And it did look like modern blackface to me. It did look like digital blackface. I don't know how you draw the line. I'm not sure when it becomes appropriation. When Paul Simon recorded Graceland. And he went over to South Africa. And he collaborated with Ladysmith Black Mambazo. And he incorporated that music into his pop sound. He got a lot of criticism from young people at the time when he would tour colleges. They would accuse him of cultural colonialism, of stealing, of theft. He defended himself by saying, I'm not stealing anything. I'm collaborating with other musicians. We're making great music. I love this music. I honestly don't know how I feel about that debate. I think there's plenty of gray area to be discussed. What I'm telling you today is, from what I viewed on TikTok, I was disgusted. It's the old cliche from the Supreme Court about pornography. I can't define it, but I know it when I see it. That's the best formula I can put on this. I can't define appropriation. I can't define digital blackface, but I know it when I see it. And it's just all over TikTok. Well, there was a strike at, let's see, what does this article have to say? I'm looking at Fox.com right now. Black content creators, fed up with the rampant cultural appropriation on the platform, are refusing to dance to the song. They're talking about a Megan Thee Stallion song. Because it's been so virally appropriated by white folks. Dubbed the hashtag Black TikTok strike, Black TikTokers are hitting pause on their dance tutorials indefinitely, making this the first collective action the platform has seen, where creators are equating uncredited trends with unpaid labor. The move comes amid larger conversations about race and appropriation on the platform. One such recent controversy saw white female creators flooding TikTok with videos of lip-syncing along to Nicki Minaj's Black Barbies. While the trend first emerged as a way to celebrate Black beauty, it's now a site of heated discourse on the lengths to which non-Black creators will go to pantomime Black culture for views. Well, I'm guessing you're probably way ahead of me on this. I don't know. I've read about these issues over the last year or so, but when I experienced it, when I actually took a little dive into the medium, I noticed immediately, well, this is just disgusting. And how, we talk a lot about individual racism versus systemic racism, and some people want to, I guess in an effort to walk the line, to walk a little bit of a center, they'll say, well, yeah, individual racism mostly is gone. We still have skinheads and KKK members, but they're a fringe. Mostly Americans are cool. It's the system that needs to be fixed. There's racism embedded in the system. A lot of people want to walk that line, kind of well-intentioned white folks. Say, well, yeah, most race, but this just threw a whole big wrench into that theory. Because what I saw was just blatant racism. How in the world could a white person lip sync to Black content, all the mannerisms, all the dancing, without a basic misunderstanding of race in this country and of racial inequities? That's not systemic. That's personal. That's a personal flaw. When I saw white person after white person after white person doing this digital blackface, mimicking, how do they put it here? Pantomiming. Yeah, perfect word. pantomiming black culture. If you can do that and not be aware of how just gross and obscene it is, then yeah, that's a personal thing. That's not a systemic thing. You got some personal work to do. And it just fits so perfectly into the history of this country, going back decades and decades, centuries even. The exploitation, the theft of black culture. Because it's one thing for a Paul Simon to collaborate with a Ladysmith Black Mambazo. It's quite another thing for the early 20th century folk artists of Appalachia to comb the countryside for black folk songs and to literally steal them and then record them in Nashville. Or for Colonel Tom Parker to make black rock and roll, rhythm and blues palatable to a white audience by giving them to Elvis. Minstrel shows, blackface, from antebellum days right up through, we were still seeing this in the 70s, in the 80s. We still get isolated cases. And it does, I'll admit, it does get a little more difficult when white suburban kids are just totally enthralled with hip-hop culture because it's just damned good and entertaining. There are ways of sharing cross-cultural art, music, fashion, without this blatant exploitation. You know it when you see it. And to take it back to the earlier conversation, because this offends me, because I define this as digital blackface, I'm not the spokesperson for the entire left spectrum of the American political landscape. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and the entire Congress, this isn't at the top of their list. It doesn't define us. Climate crisis, economic injustice. Yes, race is among the issues at the very top of my list. And white TikTok appropriators might be a small story that sort of informs that larger issue. But don't accuse me, or any of us, of getting buried in the minutia, of being woke, of being silly, of bringing down the entire Democratic Party with our foolishness. No. A couple other quick stories that relate to this wider notion. A couple of high schools in Australia have decided not to put on the musical Grease because several students were offended by the message of Grease, that it was sexist, because the female lead, it's Sandy, and what's the male lead's name? I forgot. Danny. That's it, right? I think that's what it's. Sandy and Danny. Sandy changes her entire worldview, her entire look, in order to get her man. And it's a very bad message, according to these students. And it wasn't parents, it was students who decided, no, we can't do this. We don't like it. It's not politically correct. I'm fine with that. I think I've mentioned a few times, I directed high school theater for about 10 years. I never for a second considered doing Grease. For that reason. And also, if you know anything about the musical Grease, it debuted on Broadway way back in the early 70s. I saw the original production. And it opens with a high school reunion. All of the characters coming back like 20 years later. And then they're reminiscing about the old days. And the original Broadway musical was really, really crude and dark. It was a dark comedy, really. It was just filled with profanities. And all of this, teenage sex without protection and, everybody's smoking, everybody's drinking, having unprotected sex. They're being just the worst, crudest, most horrible characters. But that was the point. It was a gritty, dark comedy, over the top, politically incorrect. It was wonderful. It was beautiful. It was over the top. It was nuts. It was crazy. The original Grease. Nobody, either they don't remember it. I think most people don't even know that. I think I'm telling you brand new information here. Yeah, the original Grease was really, really edgy. And all of this horrible behavior of these children was played for dark comedy. But then it got cleaned up. Of course, the movie is what everybody thinks of, but they left in the unprotected sex. They left in all the smoking and all the drinking and all the absolute zero consequences for any of it. You could be a jerk, you could be a sexist, you could have unprotected sex, you could smoke and drink all you want, you can be a bully, you can be in gangs, you can have knife fights. All of this is fine. It's just lots of good fun. So what the movie did was they took away the edge, they took away the point of view of the original intent of this piece of theater. Gritty, dark comedy, over the top, intentionally offensive stuff. They took out that whole point of view, but they left in the unprotected sex, the smoking, the drinking, the sexism, with zero consequences and a big happy ending. Oh yeah, okay, so Sandy's going to light up a cigarette at the end and become a hood. Everything's wonderful. So the movie was just twisted in that way. All of these bad and dangerous things with zero consequences. And it becomes this beloved musical. And I mean, I'll admit, it's a damn fun musical. The music is great. The comedy is great. But I never for a second entertained the notion of producing Grease when I was a theater director in high school. So no way am I going to do that. My son did it. He played one of the, what do you call them? In the boy gang. And it's a lot of fun. But when you take a step back and you realize what's happening. So this is just another example. Many people saying, oh, they're being so silly, they're being politically correct, they're being woke. And it's just another bullet to put in the gun for Bill Maher to shoot. Of how ridiculous everybody is being. No nuance, no understanding. So this was just on my mind today. Political correctness, wokeism, as opposed to actual nuanced thought and progress. And stories like this get shared over and over, mostly by the Bill Mahers of the world who want to hold them up as easy targets. So whether it's the merits of the musical Grease, or it's white appropriation of black culture on TikTok, or it's the Department of Interior getting rid of offensive place names, these are all legitimate stories. They're legitimate conversations that can be had intelligently. It's not just low-hanging fruit for the Bill Mahers of the world. Don't get painted into those corners. Everybody today wants to say they're free thinkers and critical thinkers. Well, you know what? Why don't you actually be a free thinker? Those of you who are making that big claim. You put it right in your profile description. I'm a free thinker. I'm a critical thinker. Well, you know what? Understand what those terms mean. And don't just look at a headline and poop out an opinion. I'm not talking to you right now. I'm talking to other people who might be listening. I know you don't do that. I would never accuse you of doing that. I promise. You and I are cool, right? All right. Well, I'm way over my time. Let's get out of here. Talk to you tomorrow. I love you. I'm Charles Purcell.